John Tavares, for those of you who don't know, is a superstar NHL hockey player, and he signed a very lucrative contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2018. His contract will expire actually on July the 1st, and so he's a unrestricted free agent. But when he signed that contract in 2018, it was he signed I think it was a $77 million contract in that neighborhood. But a good chunk of that contract was a signing bonus, like annual signing bonuses. And at the time, John Tavares was a non-resident of Canada. And the way it works is if you're a non-resident of Canada, then of course you only pay or tax on employment income to the extent that your employment is exercised in Canada. And so that would be for home games like the Toronto Maple Leaf home games and any other game in Canada. So he would certainly pay tax on a proportionate amount of his salary based upon the number of games overall. But the rest of his employment income would be subject to U.S. tax. Now, because he's a U.S. resident. Now, he's also taxed on his worldwide income, given that he's a U.S. resident, but Canada would have the first right to tax on his employment income exercised in the States, and he would get credit, at least federally, for those amounts paid in Canada against his U.S. tax. But what about signing bonuses? Well, signing bonuses pursuant to the treaty, it's Article 16, paragraph 4 of the treaty, as the slide says here, it limits Canada to taxing those amounts at 15%. And that has been around for a long, long time. And so that's how Mr. Tavares filed his tax return. But Canada, years later, was not amused and said that, yeah, we don't think that those signing bonuses are really signing bonuses. We think they're just disguised employment income. And I could see some of the reasons why, like some commentators, as the slide says here, because the signing bonuses are so high in comparison to the amount of the overall salary, that, some commentators say it's a sham. I think that's a significant overstep. And frankly, there's one commentator in particular who I will not mention his name, but I think he thinks he's a lot smarter than he truly is. That's a big threshold. Sham, come on. The reason why superstars like signing bonuses in general is to protect amounts from the collective bargaining agreement if there's future disputes, including lockouts and a buyout is not really a dispute, but they're protected from lockouts. In other words, you're still paid, and from buyouts. If your contract is terminated vis-a-vis a buyout, signing bonuses are not included in that calculation. In other words, they're still going to get paid. And so, and interestingly, as I was, getting ready for today, a couple hours ago, Frank Saravelli, who was kind of a well-known NHL insider reporter, reported that the new collective bargaining agreement, that it looks like the NHL and the players are going to sign, or they've come to an agreement conceptually. It's going to limit signing bonuses to 60% of overall salary. And so I guess that, that kind of protection against lockouts and buyouts is now not going to be, unlimited. Let's say you had 100% signing bonus and zero salary. Nope, it's going to be 60%. So the CRA is basically, in a nutshell, saying, yeah, we don't think these are inducements. We don't think to sign. We think that it's just overall employment income. And if they're correct, then Canada has the right to tax for the employment income overall that's exercised in Canada, which of course would be a higher number. And in John Tavares's case, it was an extra 8 million, which would mean, in order to prevent double tax, that he would have to adjust his U.S. returns, because signing bonuses are still fully taxable in the U.S. Just like if John Tavares was a Canadian resident, signing bonuses are fully taxable. It's just in the cross-border context, Canada is limited in this case to 15%. And so really, once you blow through the smoke here, what is this? Well, this really is a dispute between Canada and the U.S. In other words, who has the right to tax? more, the US or Canada? Well, the treaty says that it's the US, whereas Canada is trying, in my view, they're trying to change the rules by making an assertion that these are not signing bonuses pursuant to what the treaty thinks signing bonuses are, and therefore they have the right to tax more. So in my view, if they want to make a policy change on signing bonuses, they should do this at the negotiating table, not the courtroom where you've got high profile people like this that are basically pawns in a policy fight. And then, of course, you get people chiming in that they've got no sympathy for the rich and that kind of stuff, which is really silly, because this has nothing to do with taxing the rich more. This has to do with who has the right to tax more, the US or Canada. There was headlines that John Tavares had won his case against the CRA. And frankly, that's just incorrect. That was complete misreporting by the mainstream media. And what did in fact happen was the tax court, had ruled on a procedural matter requiring the CRA to release certain documents that were requested by John Tavares's counsel. And so the tax court required and compelled the CRA to release those documents, which they since have, as I understand it. But John Tavares and other players, there's 10 of them in total, are still contesting all of these reassessments by the CRA. I understand one of them, so there's actually 9 active cases now, as I understand it, but one of them has settled with the CRA in the player's favor. In other words, the CRA completely abandoned their assessing position. And I understand the position. The reason why Canada did that is because in this particular player's circumstance, the signing bonus was not repayable in any, at least in the first year, was not repayable under any circumstance. Whereas in other players like John Tavares and Patrick Marleau, um, they're repayable in some form or fashion. And so the CRA seems to be wanting to make a lot of hay on the fact that these signing bonuses could be repayable if, for example, the players retire or just don't perform for whatever reason. So I will see where this goes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the court will uh, will decide this case. But I find it interesting that the players are, in my view, being used as policy pawns. So not good.